So if they want to go across the line and be outside the church with nobody in the church talking to them, all they have to do is knowingly speak to someone who's a suppressive person. Like me, I have been declared suppressive. I've been expelled from the church. My own family cannot speak to me.
Okay.
My 4 sisters, my brother, my mother, my 2 children, all my nephews and nieces, total of about 35 people, haven't spoken to me in a couple of years. Now, this had a big effect on my father's life. My father remarried in the 1970s to a woman who was also a Scientologist after he divorced my mother, and lived with her for quite a while. And in the 1980s, they drifted away from Scientology, and so my dad was kind of going along with being a Scientologist in order not to create a flap with the family, in order to not be ostracized. He kind of paid lip service to Scientology up until about 2001, when his wife was being harassed by a couple of my sisters, and they were writing reports on her for running a small spiritualist practice where she lived, where she was basically contacting the way she would put it, she was contacting the spirits of departed loved ones, and doing this kind of as a hobby more than anything else. Anyway, she gets declared suppressive. My dad gets declared with her. So now we can't talk to my father. Now my father is cut off from his 6 children. Now, of all the accomplishments of my dad's entire life, he would have told you he was most proud of his 6 kids. That was the joy of his life. So now he's cut off from his kids, all his grandchildren. He even had a great-grandchild born that he didn't know about. Nobody bothered to tell him. I'm as guilty of it as anybody else, because I didn't speak to him for 4 years. From 2001 to 2005, I didn't speak to my father. No phone calls, no cards, no nothing. When I left Scientology in 2005, it even took me a few months, and then I realized I hadn't spoken to my father, and here I was not planning to go back to Scientology, but I had still not even dawned on me that I should call my dad. So I did. I called him, and it was a great relief to him.
Yeah.
So we talked on the phone at least a week, once a week, and finally arranged a visit. And we went out to California. He lived outside of Sacramento, just up in the foothills in the gold country outside of Sacramento, and he was retired in his mid-70s and not in real good health. He'd had a couple of serious operations, and I told my wife I wanted to visit with him, and I wanted her to get to know him, so we did, and we got to the point where my wife was starting to really like my dad after we'd been on a visit or two and talking to him on the phone. So then he fell into bad health and actually had developed esophageal cancer. So by a roundabout means, I let my brother and my sisters know that he was very ill, that he was asking to speak to them, that he wanted to make peace with them, and nothing happened for a while. And then I heard back that they 2 of my sisters and my brother had actually driven up there and had gone to the town where he lived and had made contact with neighbors, saying, we understand our dad's sick, we know he's in the hospital, we're looking for him. And they made the rounds of all the people that they knew that knew my dad, letting them know that they were around, but they never went to see my dad.
Yeah.
They never left a note on his house, which they all know where he lives.
Yeah.
They never went to see him in the hospital.
Yeah.
It made me very angry.
Yeah.
And so that was where I crossed the line and started talking about the church, because I felt that was
destructive, is what it was. It was destructive to your family, this enforced disconnection policy.
He died in June of 2007 without... It's hard for me to talk.
I understand. So you his son, you were the only one in the family who was in touch with him at all. The rest of them were practicing this enforced disconnection from corporate Scientology. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
He basically, when he passed away, he hadn't talked to 5 of his 6 children in 5 years. It was a bad scene.
Yeah. Well, this kind of thing is very common.
I apologize. It's just
No, that's okay. This
it's
whole
very
thing.
emotional for me.
Well, it's understandable. This kind of thing is very common in organized corporate Scientology, where this group that purports to be a religion is actually smashing human rights and the right to enjoy your family, the right to be in communication with your family. This kind of thing should not be tolerated.
He was actually interviewed by one journalist shortly before he died, and he wasn't feeling well. He wasn't really up to being interviewed, but he was interviewed by a journalist, and one thing he said was, it was kind of the last thing he said. He said his message was, if it comes down to where a church makes you choose between that church and your family, you need to really examine the motives of that church.
Absolutely.
You need to really take a hard look. If a church is going to get between family members and say, look, it's either the religion or the family, if you choose the religion, you better take a good, hard, long look at what you're giving up.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to plead for sympathy from anybody. I'm just saying being cut off from your entire family is a very tough thing.
I got it. I really got it. I really appreciate
It's not. I'm just saying it's not an easy thing to live with.
Yeah.
And what I would say about anybody who's interested in Scientology is, if you're going to read about it or take an introductory class, you should also be aware that there are people that have gone all the way through Scientology that have had some very, very bad experiences. And so take a warning from people that have been there. It's not all roses. There's a dark side to Scientology that people need to be aware of.
Thanks, Mike. It was very brave of you to actually...
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, that's my pleasure, and I'm sure our listeners liked it too. Very brave of you to come here today and actually, I know, have to discuss some very painful things. But this information needs to get out about what the true nature of this group that calls itself a Church of Scientology, what they're doing with families. And this is really what we've covered today, and also how they treat their own loyal group members. And we really need to, as a society, take a look at this organization and say, is this really a religion? Do these folks really deserve this organization? Does it really deserve this status? We have to take a look at the human rights aspect, because a religion should have a sincere respect for human rights in its practice. Not just say, well, we support human rights. That's nothing. That's superficial. You have to look at the practices of the group.
The other thing is that there's thousands of families that have been affected. It's not just a few people.
Yeah.
It's thousands of families have been affected, both in the Sea Org and outside.
Yeah. You can actually find that information on the internet. A lot of that.
Yeah.
A lot of and in the media too as well. Mike, thank you for being on The Edge today.
My pleasure.
I want to thank my listeners for being with us on The Edge. I'm the producer and host of The Edge. My name's Tom Smith. We will be back again next week with another interesting guest. Bye-bye.